Broadcast. Welcome everyone. As you sign in, please feel free to put your name and the name of your firm into the chat so our presenters today can know who's in attendance. We'll get started in just a minute. And for everyone just signing in, welcome. We'll get started in just a minute. In the meantime, please feel free to put your name and the name of your firm into the chat so our presenters know who's in attendance today. All right. Well, let's get rolling. So welcome everyone to the last installment in our Storytelling with Architects series. We'll be hearing today from Melissa Rome, interviewed by Terry Dreyer. As a reminder today, everyone in this webinar is in attendee mode, so all participants are going to be muted. Your video will be off, but we do encourage you to use the Q&A function to ask any questions of our presenters. If you run into any issues with connectivity over the course of the webinar, please use the call-in number that you received in your email in order to access this webinar. And feel free to send your name and AIA number if you end up calling in to Lauren at aianeworleans.org so that she can get you credit for this. We will be recording this session, so it will be available on our YouTube afterwards, so you can check that out there if you want to review any of the pearls of wisdom that you're about to hear. A note on the agenda for today, after we go through introductions, we'll be hearing from Melissa Rome in conversation with Terry Dreyer. We'll have a brief Q&A, and then we'll close out with some of our upcoming events. So Terry, would you like to introduce our culminating guest of the series?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the AIA Storytelling Series, actually the last AIA Storytelling Series, which we are ending with a massive bang. Wonderful Melissa Rome from Rome Office, who's a partner, is the owner of the small business, woman-owned business, and today is her birthday. So thank you so much for spending this time with us on your birthday. We are very honored. The first thing I'm gonna start with is, as we've done before, is a couple of questions so that we get the opportunity for Melissa to talk and tell us about herself, about her work and about her hobbies and whatever she would like to talk about today. And I just want to tell you how grateful that we are that you are here in New Orleans as a woman-owned business and an architect, and I think your work's outstanding. So the first thing I would ask is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and actually how you even got here?
Sure. First off, thanks Terry, Aaron, and Lauren for inviting me to participate in the series. I'm very excited to do this, although I've never talked this much about myself to a large group of people, so I'm a little nervous, but I mean, I should be the most knowledgeable on this subject, so here we go. I have some images too, so that you don't have to look at me the whole time I'm talking. Hopefully everybody can see this. I am originally from Clemson, South Carolina, which is located at the base of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's a small college town with about 17,000 full-time residents. And I think the school's around 26,000 students now. So during holidays and summers, there would be a mass exodus of people, and our town would quickly turn into a small town. I don't have any family members that are architects. The closest profession would be a professor of mechanical engineering, which is my grandfather. So I I wasn't aware of architecture as a profession really until high school. At a career day, one of the professors from Clemson came and had this incredible model of a Japanese style single family house. And I don't remember anything he had said about the building, but I do remember being enthralled with his model. And so I had originally wanted to be a paleontologist, and my parents advised against that. So I ultimately decided to apply to Clemson University for architecture, solely based on the fact that I loved math and art. Reflecting on it now, I think it was actually great advice from my parents, because in a way, as an architect, I get to study the history of life on Earth just through studying structures rather than fossils. And I have much more flexibility than a paleontologist. So I ended up going to Clemson for architecture, right in my parents' backyard, and ended up loving it. And that's a lot of thanks to my colleagues that were there and the professors. You know, the experience really shaped where I am now. Not only did it introduce me to my profession, but also to my partner in life and work. This is me and Brian in like 2003, I think, in actually Barron and Toop's office down the hall from where our office is right now. So while at Clemson, Brian and I experienced a lot of pivotal moments together. To name a couple, we studied abroad in Barcelona with 15 other people, which was eye-opening in a lot of respects for me because, you know, I told you I went to college in my parents' backyard. So it was the first time that I lived in another place for a prolonged amount of time. And the exposure to Spanish architecture, both contemporary and historic, really opened my eyes to the possibilities of design and its role within different contexts. Brian and I also participated in a summer design build project in Marfa, Texas, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with. Not our project, but Marfa, Texas. We were introduced to the process of making mud bricks and rammed earth structures. We surveyed the small town and got to know some of the residents. And, you know, we were obviously introduced to Donald Judd and Dan Flavin and some other really great artists who still to this day influence our work. This is the design build project that we did out there. We were given a single family home and just asked to make an intervention with 1,300 mud bricks. And we ended up creating a path through the house by excavating around, cutting up the floorboards and excavating around and using that dirt to make the bricks on the exterior, and the exact opposite, like the flip solid void relationship on the exterior. After graduating from Clemson, I moved back to Barcelona with a really good friend of mine, Lisa Day, who was graduating from the landscape architecture program at the time. While living in Barcelona, I first worked for a Japanese product and lighting designer named Hiroshi Tsunoda. This is Hiroshi here. I learned a great deal about designing at the product scale. Just the influence of materiality and simple moves in creating objects. Then I was lucky enough to get a job at Roldan and Berenguer Arquitectes, who told me on day one that American architects know how to think, but we don't know how to make. So from that day forward, it was a crash course really in Spanish attention to detail, materiality, and sensibility. For example, I remember one of the things that I learned in this office was that morning light is blue and afternoon light is yellow. And it's important to understand the way that plays a role in the way you should think about interiors of a building. So it's a very nuanced, I think, influential moment for me as a young architect to learn from these two great designers. A year later, I moved back to the States to work for an urban think tank in Charleston, South Carolina. Urban design afforded a refreshing change of scale from product and building scale. And it was political in nature, which is, or was especially appealing to me at the time. Several of my family members work in politics, and I saw it as a way to kind of blend the two fields together. And at that point I had worked, in offices that designed the product and the building and the urban scale. But the problem was I loved all of them. My goal at the time was to go to graduate school and become a professor, but I was still unsure of what, for what. And I was hoping that a singular experience would have informed what I was going to study. But in the end, I realized that architecture gave me the opportunity to work in all of these fields, so why would I limit myself to focus on one? So I ended up applying to schools of architecture. I was very happy to land at Yale. My family and friends were shocked that I could get into a program like that, and I honestly agree that in terms of intelligence, it might not have been the best fit, but luckily for me and a lot of other people, being a good architect is more than just being the smartest person in the room. There's no need to explain the impact that Yale had on my approach to architecture. I mean, I was surrounded by geniuses, both my colleagues and the professors. There were endless opportunities with access to world-class architects, facilities, traveling programs, you name it.
So did you have any mentors from that opportunity, or, who did you love and who did you hate?
I did, well, I mean, if I'm being very general about it, I think it was a very different experience from from the experience I had at Clemson Architecture School, because I had wanted to become a professor because I loved my professors so much at Clemson. They were so nurturing, and I felt like the reason they were a professor was because they wanted to teach people. Whereas when I went to Yale, I felt like I was maybe helping the professors along with the side project of the work that they were interested in. It was a little less nurturing, so I think that had an effect on me a little bit in terms of pushing me towards practice in architecture rather than becoming a professor. I've been lucky enough to teach a studio at Tulane, which Brian and I really enjoyed. But yeah, I mean, building on that, a specific note was at Yale was my involvement in the two building projects and Moss's PS1 exhibit in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just this hands-on experience, along with what I told you about the professors, it really pushed me in the direction of wanting to practice rather than teach right after.
Right. That is one wacky looking thing. That's awesome. Mm-hmm.
So after school, like I said, I wanted to go practice architecture some more. And I actually started at a really small startup in Brooklyn called Kaza, and learned a little bit about how difficult it is to run a small office. And then after that, thanks to Brian for getting me a job, I joined Big as its 25th employee in their New York office. And I was the first female project designer that they hired, which, I mean, for me, it meant a lot going into a group of, I mean, there were females in the office, but everybody was an intern,
Right.
So that meant a lot for me at the time, and I felt a lot of responsibility, going in for that role. And I was brought on to work on Vancouver House, which is this building that you see here. I worked tirelessly on this project until my very last day there in 2016, when the building was in CA, well under construction. It had just risen above grade, and it was the hardest thing in the world to walk away from it at that point. But it just completed this year, so I would have been there a really long time to see the actual completion of the project. But I can't tell you how proud I am of the work that I put in on this. It's, I went from project designer to project manager during the construction document phase. And I'll talk a little bit more if you ask me about my mentors.
I did. Oh, I thought I did just now. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm asking you about the mentors. I thought I heard. I said before. Yes, please do.
Yes.
And I love the fact that you're talking about the emotional component of a building that you're not only proud of, but that you grew through, right? That
Yeah,
you
and then you have to walk away from.
And then you have to walk away because it's really not yours, and you're like, oh, but it is, right? So that's. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and the mentors that you have in the field.
Definitely. One more thing on Big though, while I have this photo up, I have to say that my experience at Big is probably the most influential experience of my life that has led me to where I am today. I mean, the people of the office, the culture of the office, you know, they're the types of the projects, the energy, the enthusiasm for architecture, but not just for architecture, for life in general. It was, I mean, intoxicating. I'd never had so much fun. And it reminded me after three serious years at Yale that architecture is a fun and playful profession, and that it's pointless to waste a minute of your life doing something that doesn't challenge you or make you happy. So after 5 years of working with these fabulous folks, that's when Brian and I decided to move down to New Orleans and start our own thing. You asked about mentors. So this is not Bayat Shank, this is Rael, sorry for that. Ron was the professor that ran the Marfa studio that we did, but I also took a number of his other classes because I just thought he was, you know, one of the greatest teachers. He is one of the greatest teachers, hands down. He's a tenured professor at Berkeley now and a partner at San Fratello Architects and Emerging Objects. So they're into 3D printing now, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this project called Border Wall Architects. It's on the border of the US and Mexico, and they basically built seesaws into the fence between so that the two communities can come together and have fun together. It was just, they're fabulous designers, both he and his partner, Virginia. But I had him as a professor my second year of architecture school at Clemson, and he was fresh out of GSAP. So he had a lot of great ideas, a lot of energy. And he, at the time, I was such a box checker, just tell me how to get an A type student. And he was the one that really taught me there are more important things in life. And to be a good architect, you had to take chances. And sometimes going down a path would lead to a fantastic result. But other times it was the process that counted, and you know, not necessarily the end result. So I specifically remember a project brief that called for the design of an amphitheater. And at the end of the semester, I'd only gotten to the point of manipulating my site through like a series of rigorous contextual studies, but I didn't have a building at all. And he gave me a high grade for it. And I was just like, I mean, wow, you know, exactly. So from that point forward, I think I've been inclined to question briefs, search for opportunities around specific design problems that are being addressed. You know, don't be limited by this idea of there's one path to do something. And I don't know, he's an amazing person and definitely influenced me a lot.
Wonderful.
And then there's one more, Bayat Shank. We could all be fortunate enough to work with Bayat every day. He is a partner at Big and the director of detail design there. He's very Swiss, which should be enough said, but to build on that, he worked for OMA, where he led the design for the Seattle Public Library. He worked for Frank Gehry, where he was a project architect on a number of museum projects, including the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao and the Vitra Chair Museum expansion in Germany. And I had the pleasure of working very closely with him on the construction document phase for the Vancouver House project. Mm-hmm. And I mean, keep in mind, I mean, this was a 1 million square foot monster project with 8 different facade systems and thousands of unique details. So getting to sit by his side and kind of learn how he thinks about these things. I mean, I feel so lucky to have had that time with him. I think the most important lesson that he taught me is that the more you know, the more you don't know. I mean, everybody's heard that, probably said they know that, but he took it a little bit further and said, it's not about knowing all of the right answers. It's about knowing all of the right questions to ask. So, I mean, just in the case of building all over the world, in different markets, with different construction types and project budgets, it's really helpful to know exactly the questions you need to ask, not exactly understand the right answer. And Terry, we were talking about, before everybody got on here, how hard it is to go from the scale that we both worked at and then move somewhere like New Orleans and try to start your own thing, because the projects are so different. So in that case, you have to know the right questions, because you're not going to know all the answers. But you could actually sound smarter by asking the right questions than knowing all the right answers, in my opinion. And then lastly, I just want to say a little word about Bjarke and Sheila Maney-Sogard. So I'd say as a business owner, Bjarke and Sheila are one of my mentors because of the way that they run their office. I mean, Bjarke is a great designer, but to create a place that people love to be and retain your employees for however long they were doing it at the time, I mean, that's something really special. So in that regard, they're a mentor to me as well.
That is hard. It's hard, that navigating architecture and the business of architecture together, because
exactly. And soon to be Terry Dreyer, who is going to coach me on being a woman in New Orleans owning my own firm.
You need to coach me on all this incredible work. I want to ask, going back to some questions, because I mean, the work's outstanding. You're so fortunate, and how incredible is why did you become one? Well, you wanted to be a paleontologist. You kind of talked about that a bit, and then you kind of were like, not going to happen.
Yeah. But I sometimes wonder why they were okay with an architect, but that's the point.
But then I saw, and then what inspires your work is like why and what. But in that inspiration, I was looking at the Martha, Texas portion of your life, right? And that idea of paleontology, that you were actually working with the materiality of how to compose a building, and how that probably on some level has really kind of sunk in on what your intent was in the beginning. Yeah, but if you could talk a little bit about that philosophy that you have, what inspires you, and how it's driving you even in today in New Orleans, or in the past, or some of the things that you've internally thought about.
I mean, I would love to be able to kind of whittle down what really inspires me to something that I know people would want to hear, but I have a boring answer of everything inspires me. Life experiences, family, friends, mentors, my 3-year-old. I mean, things I see on a daily basis, places I visit, conversations I have, artists I admire, everything.
I love that. That's very inspiring. Everything. That is what inspires you, is everything, moment, experience.
Yeah. But in terms of a philosophy, I'm still developing that a little bit. I think as a young firm, Brian and I are going into our 5th year with Firm Office, which is about as much time as we spent at Big. And we're still very young. And you can't it's not easy to go out there and just say, this is my philosophy, and these are the projects I want, and these are the projects I'm going to get, and these are the budgets I'm going to have, and it's going to be great. So I have to say that our projects are really influencing us right now when we, try to understand what our philosophy is and where we're taking the office. But in general, I think more than a philosophy, we have an iterative process that we practice, that we trust. It's been kind of based off of the one that we practiced at Big, but kind of tweaked in our own way. And it's generally that the project team that we follow it throughout the life of the project. So it's not just in concept design, but also in detail design, where we push ourselves, to come up with multiple options that can respond to a certain problem. Even when we feel like we have a great answer and we should go with this, we push ourselves one more time to say, well, how else can we re-envision this problem? How else could we approach it? And we surprise ourselves sometimes. We come up with things that we weren't originally inclined to think about. And that's what I think really makes our life or our work special. And while it's not an easy process to uphold, especially when you're a young firm that doesn't necessarily get the fees that someone like a Big can get, for me and Brian, it's the end result, I think, is worth it. So I think in general, we believe there are several ways to approach a design problem. And you just need to keep pushing yourself until you almost surprise yourself, not just the people that you're presenting to. And then I guess on top of that, I would say that as a boss and an employee, it's important to remember that architecture is subjective and that there's no right answer, and to embrace and celebrate the fact that you're not on an island when designing a building. And that kind of applies to not just people in your office, but your clients and contractors and everybody else. It takes a village. We might have lost Terry, but what I can do is show you guys a little bit of how we, in the office, kind of practice that iterative process that I was talking about. This is the Gravier Street Schoolhouse. We just received a AIA Honor Award for this project. Very proud of it. It's an adaptive reuse project, tax credit project. And if you've seen it before, you know that we had this concept of providing restoring the entire schoolhouse plan, and then providing what we called a box for living that we placed in the center of all the classrooms to transform the classrooms into a one-bedroom apartment. So these boxes included everything you need for living: bathroom, kitchen, laundry room, mechanical, storage, you name it. And we didn't necessarily start there. It was the first option we looked at, I think. But we pushed ourselves to think of a couple of other options to present to the client. One, because it kind of pushed us as designers to re-envision the problem in a few different ways. But also because it helped us to show the client why we thought that option 3, the box, was our preferred way of responding to the problem. So, we started out with 3 options. We don't just, superficially put together these 3 options. We actually figure them out to plan level. And then also give some thought to materiality to each one. Thankfully, and I give the client credit for this, they decided to go with option 3, the box. And, so we were very proud to be able to develop that for them. Hey, Terry.
I'm back. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Our whole internet in our office went down, so
no worries.
Mass chaos, but I'm here. Keep going. I'm so sorry.
No worries. I decided to walk through how we implement this iterative process in the office using the Schoolhouse project. So we ended up with option 3, the box, and this is kind of the finished result of that, and we're very proud of it.
That is one of my favorite projects of all time. I think that is just brilliant.
Thank you so much. We've actually heard of other developers in the city going around being like, we need an architect that can reproduce that in our building, but they won't come to us for services. I don't know where they're going, but hopefully they'll come to Rome office.
They will someday. They will tomorrow, I promise.
So what
So
else?
that was okay. So I wanted to, the fact that we talked about your philosophy and that iterative process, you went through one of the projects, and I apologize for not being here, but I also wanted to talk about how do you see architecture for the future, not only just in the idea of the pandemic, but I want to briefly touch on that. But also, you talked a little bit about your urban experience. Can you tell me where you see architecture for the future in reference to the pandemic, and then even beyond? Also, what happens next year, or where you see it's forecasting for the next 5 years? And of course, we're interested in your thoughts and opinions and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I mean, that's a really hard question. But I think with regard to the pandemic, meanwhile, I would love for open air concept buildings to come back like the 1920s after the pandemic. I highly doubt that in the southeastern US we're going to be seeing that. I do anticipate further decentralization of hospitals. So I hope this means that there's going to be more opportunity for architects who don't necessarily specialize in healthcare architecture to kind of dip their toe into that programmatic realm. And, it could help to form a new typology of healthcare facilities. And that's similar to, for example, mass design groups initiatives that they're doing. So I think that's one thing that might change. I don't imagine on a firm level, I don't imagine that architecture firms will stop coming into an office space. Not ours, at least. Office culture and brainstorming through sketching together in person. I mean, that's too important for how architects work, in my opinion. And I don't know why anyone would want to work any other way. I could see the 8-hour, 5-day work week becoming something of the past, with more flexibility for people to be in and out of the office if need be. But I imagine there will always be a centralized space for people to come together in. And Terry, you and I were talking about the difficulty of parenting and running your own office. I think that's one of the things I think about when I say that the 8-hour, 5-day work week might become something of the past. I mean, that helps everybody in terms of flexibility and making sure that it's a possibility to have a family and be dedicated to your work. And other things, where do I see the profession going? I've been pleased with the profession generally refocusing, kind of turning away from the icon and becoming more about the rural condition and looking at historic building typologies and it being okay to build in a context and to blend with a context. I love that trajectory that the profession's on right now, and I hope it stays that way. Yeah. You're on mute, Derry.
All right. Do you think that the profession, we've been talking about the AIA 2030 challenge and all the rest of that stuff, and you're talking about the idea of historic, almost reparation, and also the idea of more broad spans or building typologies that are also about out in the landscape and such. Do you think that I always have this fear. I feel like some people in the next couple of years are going to be fearful and that they're going to want more space, yet in a different way, where it's more space but less open, right? Where we end up with a lot more program that I don't think we've ever thought of before. And and I wanted to, when you were talking about healthcare and childcare, I want you to tell me a little bit. That's one thing I was asking you about is like, so do you have different types of projects like that on your boards right now? How are you navigating them in reference to your process, historic projects or landscape type projects? And then how does your son fit into this whole mix, right? And I guess you moved back here because your husband's originally from here?
Yep, Brian's from here. I'm from Clemson, like I told you guys about. So,
right.
Yeah, so our office focuses on getting projects both in the New Orleans area and the Greenville area, which is right outside of Clemson. So
that's nice.
We understand the value of family and how they help us with our son. So in either place, if we go up to Greenville for work or we stay around here, it's always a positive for him too, because he's getting to spend time with family. But yeah, no, in our office, we cast a wide net. Like I was talking about, we don't get to be very choosy with our projects, but we do have a lot of historic projects, and we do have a lot of park projects. Not the park necessarily, but maybe architecture, pavilions, or buildings in a park landscape, which we really enjoy both types of projects. The historic project that we're working on now is another schoolhouse. It's on North Robertson in Franklin. It's another historic tax credit project, but also a low-income housing tax credit project. And that is a project type that I think we found a lot of value in working with because we're comfortable with the program type of multifamily housing, but it's allowing us to engage a more underserved population, I think, and I think we see the value in working on those types of projects. But I find it interesting, your point about people wanting more program. I can also see that, but I guess I see it as almost an exchange for big box buildings. So like, I don't know if y'all remember Ren Koolhaas's write-up about, it was called Big at the time. So it was about all of these programs coming together into these giant buildings, giant monstrosities. And I kind of see that changing into the decentralization of things. Almost in terms of, I talk about it in the hospital sense, but I could also see schools decentralizing rather than going to one place. Now that we've become familiar with this idea of at-home schooling, maybe there are little small schoolhouses in each community that people can go to, and it's not necessarily on one campus. I don't know.
I agree. That's what I was exactly what I was.
Yeah, but I actually prefer that. Actually, I think it's more community oriented, which is something, we can all benefit from. And it creates better neighborhoods. Yeah, I think that would be a great thing for architects and just people in general.
I agree. And then did your child like tell me, as a woman-owned business, right, and a woman-owned architecture business, and then working with your husband, I have a tremendous amount of commonality here with you, and I have a lot of angst as well. So can you tell me how that relationship has navigated where you are today, or the ups and downs, or the bests and the worsts, or anything that you want to talk about in reference to
in terms of being a parent,
personal relationships and parenting?
Yeah. Man, I mean, yeah, working with your husband or your significant other is one thing. And then being a parent and owning your own office is another thing. Actually, I think working with Brian is great. I mean, we operate almost as one person. And I think if we weren't in the same office every day, we would never see each other because, we're both in and out of the house so much. But I think Russo gives us a lot of perspective. His name's Russo. That's Brian's middle name, and his mom's maiden name. But he gives us a lot of perspective. I think he reminds me of, you know, everything great in life, and how playfulness should influence everyone's life and the design of things. You know, seeing things from the perspective of a 3-year-old everything is so exciting, Terry. I mean, it's unbelievable. So I think in that way, he helps us learn to enjoy the small things. And in terms of balancing work life, it is very hard. I think everybody knows, especially in 2020, that, you know, we need some flexibility as parents. We haven't been able to put Russo in aftercare this year. Someone has to pick him up at 3 o'clock. So we've rearranged our schedules to make that happen. And that's not easy, but at the end of the day, I think I wouldn't give it up for anything. So
that's wonderful. Does the going back to your not your philosophy, but your process, right? Is that idea of driving out or peeling away probably the integral or the most important elements, and then making sure you try them over and over again, and
right.
And whatnot. Has it do you feel like that process has led you in your personal and professional life, especially moving down here? How has that especially in reference to materiality too, how has that navigated your course for the projects you're in? I know we were in one of the membership roundtables, and you were specifically asking about like details and how you don't know what you don't know until you know it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I mean, man, wait, I don't know that it's ever going to come, but I'm waiting for that project where you're like, oh, I know how to do this, you know, like, but I think it's like you're saying, I think our process inherently is going to push us in a direction where we don't know how to do what we're proposing. So you have to get used to questioning code, researching code. You've got to be comfortable with the idea of reaching out to other architects who are experienced. Like you said, I brought it up at the roundtable. I think some of the architects of the roundtable were like, whoa, you know, like we don't talk about such things. But
one or two of them are, but I actually have a list of things I was going to send you. I just forgot to do it. You got to remind me.
Because yeah, like when it's, I guess just to fill everybody else in, when it's talking about typical detailing, and someone led me in the direction of the LSU Ag Center's house. It's like a prototype house that they've been working on, where it gives recommendations for the best way to build in this climate. That's exactly what I was talking about. I was like, this is really helpful. And this is what architects should have access to, so that we're not spinning our wheels on something that's a typical condition that everybody should know. And it allows us more time to focus on innovation and things that, you know, the envelopes that we're trying to push.
Right.
So
we have one question from Connor Bryan. How did you decide the time was right to branch out on your own, and how did you make it work financially? Did you have a project lined up to help you with the transition that would help you propel you into your own firm?
That is a great question, Connor. We were very nervous about this, Brian and I, but yeah, it was a project that actually we are moving into DD on this year. So 5 years ago, we got this project and we said, oh, well, you know, we had done one project together on weekends while working at Big. And we said, okay, this project, it's the treehouse project that we have on Clemson University's campus, which is essentially a canopy walk memorial. We said, okay, this is a little bit, you know, larger scale for us. We want to make sure we do a great job. Maybe we can use this as a jumping off point to start our own thing. So we moved down to New Orleans and moved in with Brian's mom and started our office out of her garage. That sounds so cliche, but that is exactly what we did for at least 3 months, I think 5 months maybe. And we were saving up all of our pennies. Brian had a relationship with Barron and Toops, like I had talked about earlier in the presentation, and they had just retired. So they said, we had met with Mike and said, you know, do you know of any office space that we could kind of get in on? He said, yeah, Steve Olson's still working in our office. You should go ask him if you can squat with him for a while. And so that's exactly what we did. We came and met with Steve, and he was gracious enough to take us in. Rent was super cheap. And that's how we made it work for the first, 6 months or so that we were working out of his mom's garage. But that's how we saved up money. You don't need a lot of money to start up an architecture firm, which we're lucky for, but you better have a plan. Better know how to go out there and get some kind of project. Because like I said, the treehouse project, we're still working on it. Was it a moneymaker for us? No. So we had to come up with something else.
Which is always good because it drives you, right? It's like, oh my God, I'm not failing after I start. There is no way.
Exactly.
Not happening.
Especially when you're leaving somewhere like a big and all your friends, you know, they're watching you. You know, it's like, okay, we gotta make something work here.
That's right. I'm not going to be embarrassed. God damn it.
Yeah. And then you get pregnant and you're like, oh God.
Okay. All right. Let me see if there's any more questions. Let's see. Nope. So far so good, but we have 10, 15 more minutes. I mean, I want to talk about what you're doing in the next steps on projects that you have on the board. Tell me how those are working out. And you talked about the fact that you've got some duality in reference to work that's here, local, but then you've been able to grow out and you could say that you're a national firm. That came through, and I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That came through relationships, right? Relationship buildings and family and friends. Can you, I mean, your philosophy is so great. Your work is so incredible. And, you know, it's that idea of having to get out there. Can you give us a story about how you navigated a project that might have been for family and friends? How did that go? What's the project besides the historic ones and the one from Big that you're talking about that you're kind of most excited about on the boards?
I'm trying to think of where to start. That's a good question.
I gave you a whole bunch of questions. You can start anywhere you want.
Yeah. Well, I think we are lucky to have the work in Greenville, and you're right, it is all about networking. I mean, you've got to be willing to get out there and make friends, and it's not superficial friends. You've really got to be curious about other people and what they're doing. It's the best way to get work. But I think, just as an example, building on what I told Connor, and then also answering one of your questions, the way we got started in the South Carolina area was through this treehouse project, which the treehouse project originated as a donation from some friends to create a memorial for a child that my sister had lost. So it was a very small amount of money, but for us, we said, let's just not really pay attention to the amount of money that's there. Let's just create something amazing, because it's also a gift to my sister and her husband and their child. So they ended up showing that to the gardens, the South Carolina Botanical Garden, which is where the structure is going to be located. And they loved it. They said, you know what? We're going to raise more money to make this. And based off of that, they had a couple of fundraisers where they had, you know, everyone in the upstate coming that is well off, developers, all these people that came, they saw the project. And then from just that one little treehouse project, we made maybe 3 more connections. And that has led to other work there. So that's really, I mean, been something special for us, especially where that one started. But in terms of, so yes, what we have on the books right now that I'm excited about is the treehouse project, actually.
Right.
Yes. We have our first new construction project that's going to break ground this January in Morgan City, Louisiana. It's another low-income housing tax credit for the same people that we're working with on the North Robertson Franklin restoration. And I'm really excited about having that go up. One, because it's our first larger scale new construction building, but two, because the cost per square foot that we're looking at is $135. And after finishing the schoolhouse project, we had a lot of people say, and because our background is big, people come up to us and say, we really love your designs, but we don't think you could meet our needs in terms of cost per square foot. We think you're too expensive, is what they tell us. So I'm really excited to have that go up so that we can show people that it's not about, the cost per square foot. It's more about just being creative and what you do with what you have. So, beyond that, we have a park project that working with Scape Landscape Architecture and TBG Landscape Architecture, the Breck Airline Park project in Baton Rouge, where we are designing a collection of smaller pavilions throughout the park. I'm really excited about that one. So yeah.
A little shimmy style. That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, wonderful. And that's great that you've been also going outside of New Orleans, right? Baton Rouge,
Yeah.
Morgan City.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And for people that are, just starting their office or looking to start their own office, it's difficult to get involved with public projects. We have been waiting to start construction on our first public project with the city of New Orleans for about a year. It's a playground and concessions building in Uptown New Orleans. We started out very small because it's just a renovation of the concessions building, but then we're proposing this kind of morphing topography landscape playground that kind of like pulls apart a typical playground and just has the standalone elements. We're really excited about it, but we've been waiting for a long time for it to go into construction. I say that because we can handle so much more in terms of an office and our experience, but you've got to get your foot in the door with something. So we're very excited about that project, and it's opened the door for working with the city of New Orleans. On the state side, for example, we have gone off after a number of RFQs for bathrooms, for like nothing huge, but it's very difficult to win these projects. So, for anyone that thinks it's an easy thing to do, not so much.
Yes, you're right. I'm still on the hunt for a state job.
Mm-hmm. Really?
Yeah, it's a long time to tackle, but talk about that offline because we're here to talk about it. And on that note, we're like 5 minutes out, so I wanted to know if there's anything else that I did not include, and then to tell you how grateful I am that you took this time out of your day to talk about what your process is, who you are as a firm, and I'm thrilled and honored to have you be the last of the storytelling series, because we started this at the beginning of the year and I didn't know if anybody was going to really do it, and we've had such great success with it, with such incredible people who are leaders in the community, and I'm eternally grateful for who you are, why you're here, and what you're going to do and what you are about to do.
Thank you so much, Terry. I really appreciate it. It was an awesome opportunity, so thank you.
If anybody has anything to add or questions, let me know, or let Erin know. And thank you again, Melissa, and happy birthday. Have a wonderful birthday day.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Happy birthday, Melissa.
Thank you. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.